How often have you felt restricted to spiritual practices that often seem outdated and of little relevance in today's world? Are you discouraged to express your own creative talents and develop spiritual practices that are uniquely you? The Liturgical Rebels podcast is for people like you who want to reimagine and reconstruct their faith and spiritual practices. It's for those who want to reshape belief and journey closer to God's wholeness with peace, justice, and flourishing, not just for themselves, but for the earth and all its inhabitants. In today's episode of Liturgical Rebels, my guest will be the Australian Aboriginal leader, Ray Minniecon. Ray had a huge influence on my life and my perception, not just of the Indigenous people of my own country, but of Indigenous people around the world. Pastor Ray Minniecon is a descendant of the Kabikabi Nation and the Gurang-Gurang Nation of southeast Queensland in Australia. Ray is also a descendant of the South Sea Islander people with deep and abiding connections to the people of Ambrium Island. He is currently Director of Bungie Consultancy's Honorary Indigenous Minister of Scarred Tree Indigenous Ministries, St John's Anglican Church in Glebe, Community Chaplain and Board Member of Bomaderry Aboriginal Men's Group in the inner city community in Sydney, working on Aboriginal disadvantaged in inner city suburbs of Sydney. He's also the board member of NAIT's Indigenous University, an Indigenous learning community, as well as of Red Dust Role Models, which takes elite athletes and professional role models to remote Aboriginal communities to inspire young Aboriginal children to make healthy life choices and stay in school. Ray, what a delight it is to finally connect with you. I think it must be at least 25 years since we first met when Tom and I spoke at a gathering that you arranged through World Vision. And that was a seminal event for me as far as my understanding of the Aboriginal people. And I spent a lot of time in tears. I spent a lot of time feeling that I needed to repent and just realized that there was so much that had happened that had not been taught, of course, in the history that I had learned. And so it was wonderful. And but you are an impressive person. I knew it then, and I know it even more so now because you've been involved in quite an amazing array of projects. Unfortunately, we won't have video, but Ray just put on his Australian hat for us, and I wish you could see it. I wish you could see it. And but you have been involved in an impressive array of projects and had wonderful opportunities to be an advocate for Indigenous peoples and issues internationally, nationally, and locally. So tell us a little bit about your background, Ray. Your past and present advocacy, not just in Australia, but around the world. Just in the 2 sentences or so, you know.
Okay.
No, I'm teasing.
I am from the Kabikabi people on my father's side, which is in southeast Queensland. And on my mother's side, I'm from the Gurang-Gurang people, which is also in southeast Queensland and from in that particular region. And I also have a grandparent on my dad's side who was forcibly removed from Vanuatu, from a little island called Ambrium Island, along with about 60,000 other South Sea Islander peoples, and brought here into Australia. It was part of Australia's slave trade, I suppose.
Yes. And I've read about that. Yeah.
So I have those 3 wonderful heritages that I'm very, very strong and proud about. And I guess it's based on based on those heritages, those connections to your past, that gives you a sense of the things that you need to be standing up for, because you're trying to make sure that you're protecting not just the past but also the future.
Yeah.
And I would love to pass on to my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren the benefits of what I'm feeling today about living on this little planet called Earth, and enjoying, hopefully giving them the opportunity to enjoy it. But because of the ways in which the world is heading and the things that are happening on it, it doesn't give me much hope that they're going to be having that experiencing these kind of benefits. And so we have to get up there and let our voices be heard, even though it might be just a little pipsqueak from me, but it has to be heard somehow and in some ways, so that people know that we're not happy with the current situation. And in spite of the fact that they won't listen to us anyways, we still have to.
I detect a little bit of Australian cynicism there, Ray. But, I was just mentioning yeah, we do get very cynical. It's easy to, and to feel that nothing can be done. But I don't know. I was mentioning the book that I read where they talked about the difference kind of perspective of Indigenous people and white people of the world, that the Indigenous people put their mental energy into keeping the world the way it was, or into helping to preserve it in the way that God intended it to be. Whereas white people are forever changing the world to fit into their doubtful vision of the future. And one that, of course, is very self-centered. It seems to me that the white vision is very self-centered. The Indigenous vision is very community and world-centered in a way, I think.
Earth-centered, yes, that's right.
Earth-centered, yes.
Our theology starts in Genesis 1 and 2, those two chapters. Whereas when we look at the Western Christianity, it starts in Genesis 3.
Yes.
With God that is about to, put us under his judgment. And so that's the fundamental epistemological differences. Genesis 1, where everything was created good, including us. And so why would you want to destroy something that's been created so beautifully and so well and so much in harmony, and create something that you think is a better way of doing it?
Yes.
And so that's to me is the fundamentals. If you're starting in Genesis 1 and 2, and it was good, that's what God said. When he made human beings, he said it was very good. And so why would you want to change what God already established? And if he's given us the laws and the means and the responsibility and the wisdom to be able to do that, then we, as Indigenous peoples globally, we don't want to see that changed. But now that we're in this process of where nothing is sacred, according to the Western epistemology, I don't think they understand what sacred is, and so nothing is sacred, and including us Indigenous peoples, and therefore we're always under the hammer in terms of how they want to define us. I often make the comment that I'm not an Aboriginal because that's not my language. It doesn't really identify who I am, but that's the language of the colonizer in trying to give us some kind of a way in which they can communicate with us or to us or about us. And so it's more political than anything. And so it's like the Native Americans, they were called Indians, but they're not Indians.
No.
Once you get down into the different tribal boundaries and identities, it's a much more beautiful people and system that's in place there and operating at those cultural levels.
Yeah.
And connected to the land.
Oh, very much so. I mean, in fact, working with Indigenous people in many parts of the world, that is the common theme that you see. the sacredness of the earth, the sacredness of this planet that God has placed us in. And the older people, the older Indigenous populations all have this viewpoint. And it's only the more recent, the Western, well, not just the Western, but, we predominantly see it in the Western cultures now. There's different that, the earth is here to just use it up. And even our theology has been reinvented to make that possible, for us to justify our destruction of the earth.
Oh, yeah. And that destruction is supported by the Western Christianity.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The major thing that I see with Western Christianity is that it's taking this relationships between humans and our creation and the Creator and all the things that God has created. They've taken that out of the whole equation and made it into an individual.
Yeah.
Yep. It's very, very, very clear in terms of the ways in which the message comes to us as Indigenous people, as well as the world, because you just take that John 3:16 passage, for example, for God so loved the world.
The world, not people, the world.
Yeah, the cosmos.
Yes.
And so Western Christianity has reinterpreted that by saying, for God so loved you and only you. And you have to get yourself right with your Creator because of Genesis 3.
And this is the way that you do it, too. Very prescribed kind of ways of doing it.
The formulas are there.
Yeah. Now, excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold here. But one of the challenges in that first gathering that we were involved in together was that the Christians that we were with came from many different backgrounds. Some were Pentecostal, some were mainline, and some of them, particularly I think the Pentecostal side had been told that they needed to discard their Indigenous backgrounds, whereas the more mainline were told that they needed to encourage it. And there was a lot of confusion because of that, I think, amongst Indigenous Christians, because they didn't know what of their cultures they were supposed to hang on to, which is, of course, such a shame. And, of course, it has had a huge impact on a lot of Indigenous peoples, this kind of ambivalent kind of response to Indigenous cultures.
Yes. Oh, look, yeah, we could probably fill the whole of this particular thing about that.
Yes.
But, I think that's why one of the challenges we have is what Tom had written about back there in that earlier with the mustard seed conspiracy, that it's the smallest seed that becomes a large tree. Growth is organic, it's unexpected and beyond control. And so small is powerful.
Yes.
And this is a huge, big critique on consumer Christianity and upon the ways in which Western culture has evolved in terms of the ways in which it does that. And so we're not going to go back to Tom's understanding of alternative lifestyles of simplicity and justice, and because that conspiracy isn't just Tom Sines.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Jesus came to do.
Yeah,
he came here to deconstruct, decentralize the powers and political powers, and try to make us understand that our relationship, first and foremost, is with our Creator and with His creation and with each other. And you can't break those three things down. Yeah. Well, that's how I understand.
At the that's our dog this time. I heard your dog probably in the background, and now my dog is in the background. One of the first things she did at that conference which so impressed me, was that you convened a group of elders, respected men and women from diverse backgrounds, who would help us discern, guide, and sensitively listen to the direction of the meeting. I was so impressed with that, the sense of community. You know, we listen as community. And since then, of course, I've come across the Quakers who do something similar in a way, and again, been impressed. And in fact, we had a good Quaker pastor who taught us, you know, to use the Quaker listening process and listening as a group, and recognizing the people who are what Quakers call heavy listeners. I don't know what the Aboriginal people call them, but you know that idea that the elderly have wisdom that can guide all of us. It was just so refreshing and so powerful, I felt.
Well, we've always abided by this concept of what we call the 7-generational principle. And so when I'm here in this particular generation and I want wisdom and knowledge about lots of things, I don't go to a book. I go to my elders, to the not just my father, not only my grandfather, but my great grandfather, in order to all the wisdom they have accumulated and passed on. And I'm there now to make a decision on something that might be of utmost importance, not just to me, but to not just my children or my grandchildren, my great grandchildren, those yet to be born. So it's you're living in that kind of that sphere of influence from your culture, from the laws that have been handed down of that 7-generational principle. And so you have to listen to your elders. You have to listen to the community. You have to allow people to speak, because their wisdom is just as important as anyone else's wisdom.
Yeah.
Actually, their wisdom is just as important as Albert Einstein or any other professor. Yeah.
Well, and it makes me realize at another level how horrible the impact of the stolen generation was. The people that were taken away from their families, and there were some at the conference, and you know, chatting to a couple of them, could see them grieving for what they did not have, and part of that was their own elders. I think, you know, just part of that was the community that they'd lost. And, you know, of course, it was something that was done to disconnect them from community, and has been a policy, of course, of Western nations around the world, in so many ways, I think.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, that particular policy, the Stolen Generations policy, it came from a different, the roots of it was anchored in a thing called the White Australia policy.
Yes.
White Australia policy was that was driven from the Darwinistic theories, or Darwin socialism, which when they discovered us, we weren't human.
No.
We
When I
were lower
read
than
that,
animals.
I was so appalled that Darwin said you weren't human. I
And
just,
so, yeah, and so we were then given, or they took upon themselves actually that incredible uh, opportunity to make us into white fellas so that we could be seen as, human.
yes, yes, yes.
According
Oh,
to their thinking, yeah.
uh-huh. Yeah, it's just so horrible what we have done to other peoples, and of course it's across the globe. I mean, interestingly, I think the first time I became aware of the impact of policies on Indigenous peoples was talking to a Welsh theologian a number of years ago, who, you know, again was grappling with how his people had been treated by the English,
Mm,
and the similar things, you know, some of the things where they tried to get rid of their languages and their culture and everything, so that they could become like white people, as you say.
mm.
And it's just unbelievable.
It is, yeah. One of our writers here called it a rape of the soul so profound.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and so many places that it's happened.
Yeah.
Uh, excuse me. Um, let's move on. Unfortunately, we don't have more time to talk about it because we really could talk about it um, for a long time. I think let me just say, one of the things that impacted me that this Welsh theologian said was he talked about the Tower of Babel and how the building of the Tower of Babel, the idea was to make everybody the same. And then what God did was God separated out the peoples and the languages. You know, that was his kind of interpretation of it, that it was God's intention for people to not have one language and be like one people, but to, be all cultures and all and all languages. And that really, really impressed me. And I think has shaped a lot of my responses to people in different parts of the world since then.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And now you get a bit of a insight into why we have these big ceremonies. You know, the language used these days is corroborees. Corroborees are there to celebrate, yeah, but the main point of it is to pass on knowledge to each other about certain truths that they have learned and they wanted to pass on to others. It's like the conferences that we have today. It's very tribal.
Uh-huh.
You go to listen to this particular expert on these particular things, and so you could call that a corroboree in a sort of more modern sense. But we used to do that all the time. It was just
Uh-huh.
a way of making sure that we understood our world. We understood how we're supposed to look after that country, after our world, and pass that on to our next generation. And we can do that through song, dance, through ceremonies, and also maintain the sacredness of it all.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Now, looking at your history, in 1995, uh, you made an intervention at the United Nations in Geneva on behalf of Indigenous peoples at the first hearing of the draft declaration of the rights of Indigenous peoples. How effective do you feel that was and that the rights of Indigenous people have been taken? How much headway do you feel that we've made since then?
How much time have we got? Look, I'll just say three things.
Uh-huh.
Firstly, it was the most important thing to do because if you're stuck in Australia here, like, for example, under colonisation and you're getting your children taken off you and your land taken off you, where can you go to get some kind of hearing, some kind of mediation? And the only place we could do that is at the United Nations and let other nations know what was happening to us in Australia. And then so that Australia could not lie about its First Peoples.
Mhm.
Now, when that we had that declaration, signing of that, it took a number of years before all the nations agreed, and there were four nations who did not want to sign it. And that was Australia, Canada, the US, and New Zealand.
Mm.
And what they didn't want was for us to reclaim all of us Indigenous nations from those particular countries to reclaim our sovereignty again and our rights to self-determination. And it's still the same today, whether you're in the US, Indigenous nations over there are still saying, this is our country.
Yes.
Doesn't belong to Trump, doesn't belong to the Republicans or the Democrats, it belongs to us. But the problem they have, as well as we have, is that the weapons now that the invaders have are much more powerful and can
Yes.
destroy us
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just the physical weapons, it's the media. I was thinking of the recent referendum in Australia that
Oh, yeah.
was so distorted by, the media and everything. And that's been a huge weapon that's been used against Indigenous rights, I think, in many parts of the world.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why the declaration was so important for us, is that we could give this government here an opportunity to hear what other Indigenous nations are saying, and also how to make sure that their policies can change to suit the ways in which Aboriginal people see land, see each other, see progress, and see a whole range of other things. So the declaration is very, very important to us. At the moment, Christine, it's under threat because your guy over there, he's
Don't call him my guy. Thank you.
Oh,
I'm
okay,
still an
sorry.
Australian.
Well, that bloke, I find it hard to say his name.
Yes.
He's created a huge big challenge for us. He's pushed Indigenous rights right over to the margins again. And just recently we had the Prime Minister of Canada come to Australia, and one of the things that he did here, he spoke to us. But one of the things he said, he says, the old order is not coming back, Carney said. And it was more like a eulogy, not a warning.
Wow.
He said, it's the end of a pleasant fiction and the beginning of a harsh reality where big powers submitted to no limits, no constraints. And so the question for middle powers like Canada and Australia and others is to adapt to that new reality that's coming forward now. And I think Carney's right, because the old order is not coming back. And therefore, the United Nations, where we had to lobby to get our rights heard, that's under threat.
Yes.
If you take away that, what happens? What happens to the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples? We know that the old order did not deliver justice, but the collapse of these global rules may even remove even the limited protections we have secured over so many years. And so if the international order is being rewritten, we want to know where Indigenous sovereignty is and why it can't be written into these new foundations. And I'm just hoping that this is an act of God at the moment, so that we, as Indigenous peoples who've been crying out for justice for, I don't know how many hundreds of years, can actually get some kind of an understanding of our sovereignty rights and the recognition of who we are. Some ways in which I go to COPs, on to a number of COPs to talk about climate justice. And at these particular COPs, the powers of all of these nations, whether it's about 90 odd nations who come together to talk about the climate crisis we're facing right now. So it doesn't matter whether you're Indigenous or not. We're all heading in the same direction.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Just looking at the United States, you've either got floods or you've got record heat at the moment. And people say, oh, that happens every year. That's what I've heard people say. That happens every year. It's like, no, it doesn't, and you can justify anything if you want to.
Yeah. And the climate scientists have really done a superb job in trying to convince us of this. I think the problem with the scientific ways of saying it is that it hasn't trickled down into the minds of the ordinary people around the planet. Otherwise, they would see the challenges we face. I mean, when I go to these international forums like this on climate justice, I often highlight four things that I think, from an Indigenous perspective, we would not argue about. And the first is that This is about land rights. And I don't mean, in the political sense. It's about land rights. You have a right to your land and to its protection. The second thing is that the land has rights. The oceans have rights.
Yes.
The rivers, the mountains, they all have a voice. And the Bible is full of those kind of images, the mountains singing and the trees clapping their hands and the morning stars coming together and singing. So there is this rights of the land of creation itself. That's what our old people knew, that there are these, the land is our relatives, they're our family. God gave us this incredible thing to work through that, live with that. And the third thing now, that is, it's beyond personal rights, individual rights, it's now a human right. We have a right as a human being. You have a right to good water, to good food, and to a good, clean land that can produce all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And a good,
Yes.
clean ocean also that can produce those things, because that's the way in which God has made it to be.
Yes.
So they're the fourth thing, and I think this is where my concern is. I just wrote an article about Carney's visit here to Australia and saying these things about the middle powers entering into the international order now, or changing the international order. I said the fourth thing we need is law, LAW. If we don't have that, then we've got these recalcitrants that we're seeing before us who can just, throw a bomb here, chuck an army over here, kill these kids over here.
A law unto themselves in so many
they're
ways.
a law unto themselves. Yeah. And but Christine, this is my land. This is my earth. I belong to this earth. I didn't give them the right to do that. So therefore it becomes a human right. It becomes my right to say to them, stop doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if 8 billion people can say to these two characters who are causing these incredible sufferings all over the world, then that's us standing up for our human rights by not destroying the land that produces all the things that sustain us as sustains human life on this little planet we call Mother Earth. And that's why the law is really important, the law part of all of this. The United Nations cannot produce that. Individual nations can't do that, although they can make a difference. I mean, I'll give you an example of law. There's one little country in South America that in 1948, they made a law in their constitution. And that law said that, 8 words, the army as a permanent institution is abolished.
Wow.
Costa Rica.
Yeah, I've been there.
So all the money that they would have spent on their military arms, they spent on their own environment and upon their people.
They've done a lot. Yeah,
that's
in that realm.
law. Yeah. Now, can you imagine America saying, "What? We're not going to no more military. We'll abolish the whole thing."
The billions that have been spent on these wars, trillions probably, yes. We could have fresh water. We could have education for everybody. We could have good food for everybody and healthcare. I am appalled. I keep saying that the United States has the highest infant mortality rate of any Western nation. That is obscene, but people say, oh, yes, but you're a doctor. That's why you worry about those things. I think, no, every human being should worry about these things, It's,
Yes.
You, when you were talking, I thought of the Pope has been very outspoken in these areas in a very good way, I feel.
Oh, yeah. Laudato Si is one of the most, that would be the top Christian uh, um, discourse for the times now.
Uh-huh. You, several years ago, back in 2001, had a chance to meet one of the popes. Was that Pope Francis or was
No,
it
John.
previous Pope? John. Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you find that? What was it like to have a chance to meet the Pope?
Uh, from an Indigenous perspective, or from my personal perspective, I don't know what the big hullabaloo is.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, I mean, they do treat him like a rock star, but he is, at the end of the day, he is just dust.
Yes.
Uh, he is a human like I am. He was a really nice bloke, and I like the power. The only thing that I like about these characters is the fact that they do come up with some of these things that are very important for humankind to take into consideration, like Laudato Si, when Pope Francis wrote that. I mean, that to me
Yes.
is
Yes.
powerful.
That was huge. Yes. Yes. And I think that because these figures have the eye and the ears of many people in the Western
Yeah,
culture, they can make a difference in other
they can.
cultures too, but particularly
Mm,
concerned about the Western cultures and what they might be able to do.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I on that note, Christine, one of the my personal observations, okay, was and concern for my Indigenous peoples globally. There's 470 million of us all around the planet. The big concern is that if we see the United Nations apparatus uh, be destroyed or even lessened in its powers, what happens to us Indigenous?
yes, yes,
And what other institution has the capacity to look after the world in a ways in which it shouldn't? And the only institution that has that capacity is the church.
yes.
But it's as mad as a hatter in so many different ways. I mean, I think,
Unfortunately, you're right.
yeah. Well, Tom was trying to say that back there in the mustard seed conspiracy that it's you start small, but everybody went big and lost everything. I mean, it's very very soul destroying, and I don't blame young people for leaving the church because of the ways in which the church has not
Oh,
done
yeah.
its stood up and stood up. Yeah.
Well, and I think, this is my personal perspective, that a lot of it is to do to the church's lack of concern, generally speaking, about the earth, creation. I
Oh,
think that
yes,
it's a
yes.
huge thing that young people are concerned about.
Mm,
Um, and so when the church isn't concerned, they think, why should I worry? And those that are concerned in the church are small and, kind of don't have much of a voice, unfortunately.
mm,
So,
yes. Oh, yeah, yeah. And I know here in Australia, one of the biggest landholders is the church.
yes. Yep.
They own so much property.
And one of the groups that did most of the damage to Indigenous people was the church,
Yes,
unfortunately. And the
yes,
same in Canada. We were, I remember probably 10 years ago now, we're at a conference in Canada
mm,
at a facility that had been a parochial school, and it was just coming to light what had happened in that
mm,
facility to the kids. And it's just horrendous to think that the church has been complicit in this in
mm,
so many ways. It's just a um, I think sackcloth and ashes would be the least of what we should be doing about
mm.
it at this point in time.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a long way to go. And that's what I'm saying is if the United Nations is being demolished before our eyes, where do we go as Indigenous peoples? Can the church actually stand up and declare justice for everybody?
Yep.
Not just in books and words, but in action, praxis. That's what we're looking for. Praxis, practice.
Now, it does seem, excuse me, it does seem that in recent years in Australia, Indigenous people, and this is from, halfway across the world, that Indigenous people have gained a bit of respect because of their concern for the created order and the recognition that their practices on the land reduce bushfires and things. How seriously do you think people take that? And what difference do you think it can make?
Look, it's just only one of the ancient practices that we've used to make sure that we're looking after, or we're being the gardeners that we've been called to be, if you want to use that language.
Yes.
Or you can use the word custodians, and taking that responsibility more serious. So fire farming is one of the practices that we've always used in the past. And it's good to see us trying to do that. I mean, the problem is we've had we've had big firestorms here in the country, anyways.
Huge, yeah.
And I've driven in some places here, and I've looked, and I just knew that the fuel in those forests and in those parts of the country were just ready to explode. And I had gone off and told some of the authorities that they have to do something about that, otherwise they're going to have a bushfire. They didn't, and we got a bushfire, huge, damaging bushfires. So that if those practices aren't practiced, then yes, it will just continue to be a bushfire. We do have another program that's come out of that too, that helps our young people manage the land, so we can pass on a lot of that knowledge, and that we call them the ranger programs. They're programs that a community uses the incredible knowledge that they have from millennia to actually now help in their own areas there just to manage the land, either through that particular practice of burning, or we call it cold burning. So you only burn in certain times of the year, so that you can control the fires. But there are other practices that need to be implemented that we used to have. See, Christine, this is the challenge that I can offer everybody. In our culture, in our education system, Indigenous, by the time a young child is at the age of 10 or 12, they already have a PhD in environmental science.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
Biodiversity, in astronomy. They can read the stars. They can read the oceans. They're already fully versed in all of that stuff. And they didn't need to go to a university to learn that, or a classroom. It's there. It's just available day to day, moment by moment, in the ways in which our elders passed on that knowledge.
Yes. Yeah, it's one of the things that's fascinated me. Is I've always been intrigued by the Aboriginal people and the culture in Australia. And that's part of it that I've read about that, of course, is fascinating to me as well. And the whole thing, that it was said that they had no agriculture and they had no farming. And yet it was just that their farming and agriculture was integrated with the the forests and the prairies and whatever, in a way that's different. Interestingly, I'm very interested in gardening. And when I first started to garden, one of the things that I was told, to go organic was you dug down 2 feet and you turned over the soil, which really, it's like, okay, this is industrial gardening. And over the years, it's kind of been less and less and less disturbance of the land is recognized as organic gardening. The best organic gardening does the minimal effect on the land. And it's fascinating to me how we based our Westerners based their ideas of what was right on uh, on faulty principles, on industrial principles.
Yeah. Yeah, and it comes back to that notion of how do we see the world, and our response to it. How do we fit into it? It always comes back to that.
Yes.
There's a new word that I picked up here just recently when you're talking about the stolen generations, and even broader than that. The word is called nostalgia. Solastalgia. It's different to nostalgia. Solastalgia is the emotional, nostalgia. You're thinking about something that's in the past, and you want to, wish we were still back there, and all that kind of stuff. Nostalgia. We all, as humans, experience that. But solastalgia is the emotional or existential distress caused by negative environmental change, such as climate change or mining or deforestation, while one is still in their home environment. And it's coined by a bloke by Albridge. It's described as the homesickness you have when you're still at home, resulting from a loss of connection to a familiar environment.
Interesting.
Wow. It only come into being in the late 2000s, early 2000s. Yeah, and this guy was studying people just up north of us here in Newcastle. He was seeing this mood in the people, this is non-Indigenous peoples, and he came up with that terminology called solastalgia to try to give a language to it. Now, for us as Indigenous peoples, that's just a normal, everyday experience, solastalgia, because of the colonization process. Yeah.
Right.
It's a good word.
I think we could go on talking for hours, but unfortunately, we probably need to stop. Thank you so much for taking this time. I found it fascinating, and I think that our listeners will find it fascinating as well. This has just been very educational and very energizing for me in a lot of ways. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, Christine. Please pass on my deepest love and let him know that he's got our prayers as well. And I know where he's heading, know where he's at, and we love him very much, as well as you. Thank you, Christine.
In today's inspiring conversation, Ray Minniecon helped me explore Indigenous heritage, environmental stewardship, and advocacy for Indigenous rights globally. Ray highlighted the importance of land, culture, and spiritual perspectives in addressing climate change and social justice. In our next episode, my guest will be Christy Berghoff, author of Rooted, a spiritual memoir of homecoming. Christy is an author, speaker, musician, and photographer who lives in Holland, Michigan. I am Christine Syne, author of Celtic Advent, Following an Unfamiliar Path, and The Gift of Wonder. My other books include Digging Deeper, The Art of Contemplative Gardening, and Return to Our Senses. I also facilitate the God Space Light website and write regularly on Substack. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the podcast. Please also share it with your friends or join me on Substack, Instagram, or Facebook.